back in the 60s, there was like an unwritten rule that the press didn't report on the president's private life. I know, how nice, huh? Especially when it came to extramarital affairs. So I guess like the newspapers, they just looked the other way. It was just a really different time, you know? But even if the papers weren't talking, JFK, he was. So after only meeting the Prime Minister of England once, JFK told him, quote, "I get these terrible headaches if I don't have a woman every 3 days," unquote. I mean, same. I get massive diarrhea if I don't have a man every 3 days. But he's the president. Be better. Huh? He just said a woman. So, like not his wife, not Jackie. Just a woman. Any woman. Any woman with a hole. Or a mouth. Which is a hole. Right? Moving on. Some of these women eventually came forward to share their experience when they felt like it was safe enough to do so. One of these women was named Mimi Alfred. Now, Mimi was literally 4 days into her internship at the White House and only just 19 years old when JFK invited her to go swimming in the White House pool. So, I mean, it's her 4th day, so Mimi felt like she couldn't turn down an invitation from the President of the United States to go swimming. So she said, okay. Again, what else are you gonna say except yes? So later that night, she ends up meeting with the president again in like his room situation. And he asked if she wanted to go on a private tour of the White House. So he gives her a little tour and he takes her to like his wife's bedroom and was like, here's my wife's bedroom. And Mimi's like, what? Okay, great. Then he brings her back to his room where the two would go on to have sexual relations. And that's the first place Mimi had sex for the first time in her whole life, with a 45-year-old man who happens to be the president and her boss. I know. And I was like, wait a second. The White House has a pool? What? Is it heated? I guess it was because JFK had like a bad back, so he liked the pool heated, so it felt good on his back. But then they since covered it, so it no longer has a pool. So JFK continued to keep Mimi close to him, especially times when Jackie wasn't around. That's the only time he called her. So over time, this made a lot of the other interns at the White House question Mimi, dislike her, kind of talk behind her back, because they saw that she was getting special treatment. And also, she wasn't even doing her job anymore at one point. She was like there just to be Kennedy's girlfriend, kind of, whatever, And if this is sounding romantic to you, okay. Well, behind closed doors, JFK was asking for some pretty messed up things, Mimi came out with a book many years later called Once Upon a Secret. I read it over the weekend. Really well written. So good. And in the book, she includes some truly just sad moments. So one time they're swimming in the pool and JFK turns to Mimi and tells her to, quote, take care of his friend. So she swims over to the guy and she ends up performing some mouth service to this man while JFK floated and watched. Yeah, and I guess Mimi wasn't the only one. He was having tons and tons of affairs. But the only affair that people were really talking about was with the hottest person in America. The president and none other than Marilyn Monroe were seen hanging out together at parties in Malibu, Palm Springs, and New York. And of course, there were rumors. And these rumors sometimes made it into the tabloids, but people weren't really sure what was happening. That is, until the birthday song. Happy birthday, Mr. President. Very famous. So when people saw that shit, they're like, There was this big gala at Madison Square Garden on May 19th, 1962. And Marilyn Monroe comes out on the stage in this skin-tight dress that she literally had to be sewn into. And it was gorgeous on her. That bod, wow. And she sings the sexiest version of Happy Birthday you've ever heard in your life. According to Marilyn's close friends, she wasn't wearing any kind of bra or underwear either. It was the closest thing to being naked you could get away with at an event like this. It's also the dress that Kim Kardashian wore at the Met Gala. Remember? And everyone was outraged. How could she? Oh my God. But it's a pretty dress, right? Don't come for me. After the song, when they're giving JFK his birthday cake, he apparently said, quote, "I can now retire from politics after having had happy birthday sung to me in such a sweet, wholesome way." He was joking, of course, because her delivery and dress and everything had been very sexual. I'm sure she saw it, but thankfully, Jackie wasn't there that night. But of course, she heard about it. I mean, everyone heard about it. The exchange between Marilyn and JFK was so tongue-in-cheek and familiar that people were like, oh yeah, they be f***ing. It was a pretty wild thing for Marilyn to do, but at this point, her life was in a bit of shambles. The studio she worked for was trying to fire her, and she wasn't getting any movie offers. She was a bit of a loose cannon. So this was all bad news for JFK because he couldn't risk a scandal. And Marilyn was apparently running her mouth around town, just talking about how the president was planning on divorcing Jackie and was going to marry her. Now, Marilyn was big trouble for JFK. I mean, think about it. None of the other girls he was sleeping with had the platform or power to ruin his life the way that Marilyn could. And many believe she was having an affair with not only JFK, but also his younger brother, Bobby Kennedy. I know what? So not long after this whole birthday thing happened, JFK just stopped taking Marilyn's calls. I guess she was calling out the White House too. It's I'm busy. I mean, he was just straight up afraid of what she might reveal next. Less than 3 months after the happy birthday song, on August 4th, 1962, Marilyn Monroe died. The LA County Coroner's Office ruled her death as a probable suicide. Yeah, but people think that JFK's brother, Bobby, who was Attorney General at the time, may have even played a role in Marilyns' death. Witnesses claim to have heard a disturbing tape from Marilyn's home from the night of her death, and on it, you can hear the voices of 2 men. Many believe that one of the male voices is actually Bobby Kennedy screaming at Marilyn. Marilyn's own ex-husband, famous baseball player Joe DiMaggio, always blamed the Kennedys for her death. Oh yeah. He said, quote, "The whole lot of Kennedys were lady killers, and they always got away with it. They'll be getting away with it 100 years from now," end quote. Then, tragedy strikes again.